video is going to be a what I read in the month of May video. Cannot believe that today is the 1st of June. That is just crazy. But yes, I have 5 books to show you today. Even though it felt like more of a slower reading month, I don't know why. But yeah, nonetheless, let's get into them. Some really good books this month. I think there was only sort of one like low rated book. So yeah, without further ado, the first book is The Recovery of Rose Gold by Stephanie Robel. So I did a whole independent book review on this book, so if you want to see that, I will link it up in a card. It's basically inspired by the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her mother. If you don't know that story, it is about it's not a story, it's real life. It's about the mother who sort of made up that her child had all these illnesses, and she very much kept her at home in this bubble, and you know, said she had all these allergies, and like made her go around in a wheelchair when none of that was true. She managed to sort of fool the doctors, really. So it's inspired by that real life story, and this is sort of set from both the mother and the daughter's perspective, but after the mother has been put into prison for what she's done to her daughter. So this follows on not only through the main character Rose Gold, her story, you know, getting back to life after whilst her mum's in prison, but also it follows her when her mother comes out of prison, and she actually takes her mother in and lets her live with her and her baby. So I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Just really different, something that I've not read really before. So yeah, that was that one. The next book is The Sisters of Auschwitz by Roxanne van Iperen. This was probably my least favourite book that I read out of all of these. I do read quite a bit of Holocaust fiction and non-fiction stories. So it's very hard to rate books based on Auschwitz and World War II and the Holocaust, especially when they're real human accounts. It just feels wrong to have to rate it. Unfortunately, I did give this book 2 out of 5 stars. It is the story of 2 sisters who they are Jewish, so they're not only trying to escape persecution themselves, but they're also trying to help many other people in their community. Roxanne van Iperen is sort of telling the story on their behalf, and I think sometimes that makes it a little less impersonal. I mean, it's not always the case, but for me, I found that this book told more like a textbook as opposed to a story with all the emotions and like the first-hand accounts. For me, it was very much facts, and it felt like it was just telling things like bam, 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 and like you weren't really getting to know the characters. There was a lot of people to follow, just the nature of the story, I guess, them taking different people in, and the 2 sisters own separate families, yeah, so unfortunately it did rank a bit lower than some of the other books that I've read that are around those topics. The part I actually enjoyed reading the most, and again, enjoyed is a bizarre word to use, but it was the end part when both sisters were actually in the camp. I felt you really got to know the sisters. I felt there was a lot more emotion to it, and I found that aspect quite interesting, especially because they met Anne and Margot Frank. You know, everyone knows Anne Frank. And so it was interesting to get to know a bit more about their story, because obviously if you've read the Diary of Anne Frank, it ends, you know, when they get found out, and you know, there's no real first-hand accounts from them. I mean, there's a couple, but it was interesting to get it, you know, from people who actually spent time with the sisters in the camp and could very much relate to each other, being sisters together there, and what they were experiencing. So that was that book. Would I recommend it? If you're interested in knowing more about the resistance and people that, you know, went out to help people, and, you know, they made this whole sort of small community and a safe house called the High Nest, then yes, I think you'd enjoy this book. Just be mindful, it's very, for me, it read more sort of like a textbook in a way than, you know, a real story, if that makes sense. The next book I read was Stories to Make You Smile. This is edited by Fanny Blake. This was put together for World Book Night, which in my eyes is like the adult version of World Book Day that the children all do. So this was put together and in part with Specsavers, but it's basically got these short stories all by these authors. They're all about, you know, 10 to 15 pages long, and they're just, you know, very short stories to make you smile. I mean, it says what it is. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I wouldn't say any of the stories, you know, particularly will stay with me forever, but if you want a quick read that, you know, is like somewhat light-hearted, then I thought it was quite an enjoyable book, and that's why I picked it up, just to have something to break up, you know, from reading, you know, such a dark book before. And there were some authors on here that I'd heard of or that I've read before. I'll just try and find like a couple of examples of what these stories are. So there's one story about a woman that goes to her doctor, and her doctor wants her to go to these like community classes, and, you know, she's very much like doesn't think they're for her and like thinks it's a waste of time, but she ends up befriending someone that she only like occasionally passes, like a neighbour. There is one written by Richard Madeley, which is about someone that jumps on a plane. I believe it's a true story. Someone that jumps on a plane for a job interview in America, and when he gets there, the company tell them basically our president has been assassinated, and the guy thinks that why are they like so like taking this like really seriously. Yes, it's the president of their company, but why is everything ground to a halt? Not realizing it was President John F. Kennedy that they were talking about. So a couple of different things that at the end sort of round up very nicely, sort of make you smile or go, oh, that was interesting, but nothing, you know, groundbreaking, hilariously funny, I'd say. The next one was one I was very excited to read, and I really did fly through this. This is Camino Winds by John Grisham. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It's basically a murder mystery type story, and it's based off a little island off the coast of Florida, which from what I've gathered I think is fictional. But there is this hurricane that's heading towards the island, and there are a couple people that want to stay on the island and just like hunker down and just wait it out. So the main character is a guy called Bruce. He runs the town's little local bookshop, and he's the one of the people that wants to stay and just, you know, see the hurricane through, really. And it's not until he comes out of the hurricane and assesses the damage that the police tell him that one of his friends called Nelson, who's also an author, has you know, they've gone to his property and found him dead on the property. Obviously they think he was outside, he was hit by debris during the hurricane, but Bruce and his younger colleague think that might not be the case and that it might be murder. So but it is a murder mystery. It had that sort of small town vibe that I like in the Murder, She Wrote books. It definitely reminded me of those, you know, the way that the police aren't dealing with it as greatly as they should, and like the locals have come together to investigate it and pursue and find out what happened to their friend. So I really enjoyed this. I like that it was set in Florida during hurricane season, you know, I could relate to that. And yeah, I just thought it was like one of those really nice cutesy books. If you like The Murder, She Wrote, I think you'd like this. Then the last book, and the one that I'm currently reading, I've only got about 150-ish pages left, is The Other Passenger by Louise Candlish. This is about a guy called Jamie who, you know, does his local commute every day by a riverboat. And he's met a couple of people on his commute each day, one being this guy called Kit, And one day he gets off the boat and is greeted by two police officers who tell him that Kit has gone missing, and you know, they want to have a word with him. So it follows Jamie straight in the aftermath of, you know, being confronted and interviewed, like not properly interviewed, but just like, you know, casually being interviewed by these two police guys, and he's wondering like what's going on. It alludes to some things at the start of, like, there was a night where they had a disagreement, and it alludes to a few things, like there was an argument that Jamie and Kit had, and you're thinking what went on that night, is that something to do with his disappearance? So it flits between then and also the months leading up to then, how Jamie and his wife met Kit and his girlfriend, what their lives are like, and what the relationships are. Very early on we learn that Jamie starts to have an affair with Kit's girlfriend. Jamie has a very sort of everyday job. He works in a coffee shop, but his wife is a very good earner. She was passed on this lovely big house by her parents, so they are wealthy, even though he has a very much, you know, a minimum wage job. And so yeah, it's set in London, if I didn't already say that. I am, like I said, about 2/3 of the way through, and it is just starting to turn. Some things have been, like, come out that we almost thought it was going one direction, but by the sounds of it, it sounds like the characters are sort of playing each other off to their own advantages, and where as a reader you think, oh, they're trying to, you know, frame this person, they're actually trying to frame another person, and so it's got quite interesting. I don't know if I would have picked it up if I had known that there was so much, like, heavily, like, a cheating element in it, and that obviously comes out later in the book as well, because, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm a married woman, and that sort of thing doesn't really interest me to read. But the actual bit now, we're coming to, like, things are starting to be uncovered and we're starting to get some answers. That's where it's getting really gripping for me. So I think this will probably be, at the moment it's a 3-star, but I think it will, depending on the ending, will be either a 3 or a 4-star read. So that's what I read this month. Some very varied reads, all completely different really. You've got thrillers, you've got murder, you've got some light-heartedness, you've got a really deep book, and just, yeah, some really interesting books. So hopefully one of these sparked your interest. If you think you're going to pick one of these up, let me know which one you're going to add to your to be read list. As always, my Goodreads is down below, so if you want to know, you know, to the day what I'm reading, what page I'm on, that sort of thing, then go check that out and follow me on there. Make sure you like this video if you did enjoy it, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of my future book reviews, and I shall see you in my next video. Bye guys.